Happy New Year, everyone, and welcome to Brian Sports Hub. I am your host, Brian, and I know I've been on a little bit of hiatus, but I am back, and I am excited. I have a great script for you guys today. I'm going to be touching a little bit on the College Football National Championship that is happening this Monday, January 20th at 7:30. And then I'm going to transition to a little bit of transfer talk. There have been some players, specifically one that has transferred that has really made headlines. We also have some players that have declared for the draft. That will be fun to talk about. And then I'm going to transition into NFL football. NFL playoffs started last week with the wild card. 12 teams played for 6 spots. 6 teams did end up going home, and now we're in the second round, the divisional round. It should be a great weekend of football. And then to wrap everything up, I'm going to talk a little bit about the NFL head coaching carousel. Yes, it has already begun, and there has been some breaking news, some giant headlines, and some major shifts, changes, hirings, and firings. So as always, pull up, take a seat, grab a drink, maybe a snack, maybe a blanket, and enjoy this episode of Brian Sports Hub. So as we all know, it's a new year. And with a new year comes a new opportunity for a team to etch its name into college football history. However, the opportunity this season came with a new playoff system, a 12-team bracket that would eventually crown one team the ultimate title of national champion. This year's game, that's going to be held on Monday, January 20th at 7:30, is between the Ohio State Buckeyes and the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. In this game, I personally have the Ohio State Buckeyes. They have been a dominant force in this playoff so far, and I don't see them slowing down. Now, Notre Dame has a very good defense. Notre Dame also has a very good running attack. But when it comes down to who do I trust more, I trust the Ohio State team to perform better than the Notre Dame team as a whole. The biggest weakness to me in the Notre Dame game is their lack of trust, at least the lack of trust they give me, in the passing game. They're heavily suited on the run. They heavily lean on the run because they have a great running back room and they have a great running QB. But I don't know that if their run gets shut down, because they are facing one of the top defensive lines in Ohio State, if their run gets shut down, can they win a game? Can they compete in a game with a top 10 school, our top 10 football team, arguably should be top 4 football team? Can they compete with them solely by throwing the ball or even leaning mostly through pass yards and passing rather than running? And for that, I just don't know if I can trust Notre Dame. It's going to be a very good game. I think it will be a very competitive game for the first half. But once that second half kicks off, I believe Ohio State will kick into their next gear, and I don't think Notre Dame can keep up with that scoring. I have the game being 31-21 in favor of Ohio State. I do think Notre Dame can put up some points. 3 touchdowns probably is my prediction, but I don't know if they can keep up with the volume of points that Ohio State will end up scoring. So that's going to be a fun one. It is Monday, like I said, January 20th, 7:30 p.m., Martin Luther King Day. So it's going to be very fun. It's going to cap off a whole weekend of playoff football, which I'll get to later in this episode. But definitely one game to watch, and it is the last game for college football this season. So definitely exciting that Monday night. Now, moving on from college playoffs to college players, I have some highlights, some headlines. There are going to be 2 players that I talk about. One headlined in the media this week for transferring, the other for declaring for the draft. So I'm going to start off with the transfer. If you have been watching football anytime in the last few years, you've probably heard Georgia. And if you've heard Georgia, you've probably heard Carson Beck, their starting QB. Now, instead of being a starting QB for Georgia, he is a former starting QB for Georgia. Carson Beck decided to declare for the draft. And then earlier this week, it came out and the media had broke, or the news had broke, that instead of declaring for the draft, he had flipped his decision and decided to commit to Miami after Miami offered him, according to ESPN, just over $3 million in NIL deals. So At first, I'm sitting there going, why the heck is he doing this? He should just go to the draft. But then I looked, and I was like, it does actually make more sense for him to transfer to Miami. So Carson Beck was a first-round talent. He was a top 10, top 15 QB in the first round in this draft. The problem was that about halfway through the season, his stock just kind of tanked. He just wasn't the same Carson Beck that we've seen in previous years, and it really hurt his stock. It dropped him to my opinion. I believe he would have dropped to about a third round QB. I think someone would have taken a shot on him in the third round, but he wouldn't be getting the first round money. And money now in college football has become a huge thing. It's why a lot of people start staying in, because they can get paid these millions of dollars. And this is one reason, or probably the main reason, one of the main reasons, Carson Beck decided to stay in college football. Now, he did transfer to Miami, and if you've been keeping up with pop culture, or at least the non-football side of it, Carson Beck's girlfriend is Hannah Cavender. Now, Hannah Cavender is one of the two twins, Hannah and Haley are their names, that play basketball at the University of Miami. And so there is some rumors, obviously, that he transferred over there, not only for the money, but also because his girlfriend's there, and it makes sense, obviously. But he will now be moving into the ACC, going from SEC to ACC to hopefully bring Miami back to the ACC championship and even the playoffs. In hope. That's what we're going to see. Because Miami is losing their star quarterback in Cam Ward. He is going to the draft. He has run out of eligibility. And so losing him and replacing with Carson Beck is really not that bad of a deal if you think about it for Miami, especially for only $3 million when the school makes a lot of money and has a lot of NIL earnings. So Carson Beck did make headlines earlier. Then, a few days later, another SEC quarterback made headlines when he declared for the draft in Quinn Ewers. But after the Carson Beck incident, which is not an incident, after the Carson Beck news broke from going to declaring for the draft to transferring to a school, people are now speculating, will Quinn Ewers, who had a similar season, great player, first-round talent, top 10, top 15, but sadly injuries derailed his season, ended up dropping his stock a little bit. So now people are questioning, and rumors kind of flying around, is he just going to follow Carson Beck's footsteps and be like, I'm going to declare for the draft, and then be like, you know what, never mind, I'm going to get offered this money and transfer to a school. So with these rumors coming out, I'm going to give you 3 of my schools that I think should try and bribe or, lure Quinn Ewers out of the draft, like kind of lure him back into college football to transfer over to their school. And I think a lot of other people have rumors, but these are my 3 schools that should do it. The first one I have is going to be fun. It's a fun one that I saw on Instagram, loved it. It's UNC. North Carolina needs a quarterback. They just got Bill Belichick on a new deal. And I think that adding Quinn Ewers would be a great way to not only boost sales, they'd boost ticket sales, and I think it will boost their chances of getting them to an ACC championship. So with the condition of Quinn Ewers, which they definitely have the money to sign him, they definitely have the NIL money to sign and try and lure Quinn Ewers out of the draft portion, I do think that adding Quinn Ewers to UNC will boost them, or at least will make them a top 3 favorite in the ACC to win it, behind Clemson and Miami. Clemson, Miami, UNC will probably be the 3 fighting if Quinn Ewers goes to UNC. So it's going to be a very interesting take. The second team I have, which my friend actually brought this up, and I didn't think about it until he told me all about this, is Ohio State. Now, for those that haven't really followed the Quinn Ewers career yet, Quinn Ewers came out in 2021 as the top quarterback recruit in all of football with comparisons to Patrick Mahomes. He was very good, very talented, 5-star. He committed to Ohio State. The problem was that he was behind another first-round talent by the name of C.J. Stroud. So he was buried in the depth chart, never had a chance to really get playing time, so he decided to transfer out, and that's when he got to Texas. Of course, last year, Arch Manning was recruited to Texas, accepted it, and sat behind Quinn Ewers. So now, obviously, we're thinking Ohio State, and Texas just lost to Ohio State. So if you're following this career arc, he goes from Ohio State to Texas. New QB comes in, so now there's a little bit of pressure on him. His draft stock drops. Yes, he declares for the draft, but if he were to transfer out, Ohio State, Texas, draft stock drops. He decides to go back to the team that just bounced him from the playoffs to Ohio State to reunite with his old coach, Ryan Day, and hopefully take them back to the promised land to another national championship game next year. Very interesting. I love the idea. I also think it makes a lot of logical sense because if you look at the roster around him, there are a lot of young talents that are coming back. You have Jeremiah Smith, arguably the best wide receiver in the league already. Like, he's arguably the best wide receiver in the nation already. He's definitely the best freshman wide receiver in the nation. So you have him returning. You have Quinshon, I apologize if I butcher this name, Quinshon Judkins is returning. He is a sophomore. He will be returning to Ohio State. And you have Carnell Tate, who popped off in the Texas game and, like the announcer said, would be a number one on any other team but Ohio State just because they have so many good wide receivers. He would be their number 2 returning. So you have all those pieces on the offense, plus you have a lot of pieces on the defense and a top recruit class. All of that coming back would probably be more than enough to get Quinn to at least be interested. Then you throw on a couple $1 million, which to a school of that caliber would just be a couple $1 million. It's not that not as big to like us. But throwing a couple million to them, or to him, plus having this promise of having all this young talent that is really talented, really good, I could absolutely see Ohio State somehow getting Quinn Ewers to come back to them, rejoin the Buckeyes, and hopefully get them back to the playoffs and back to a national championship game. Now, the third team I have him as a dark horse. I actually ended up thinking about this as we were talking about Ohio State. I was thinking playoff teams. I'm thinking of what teams don't have a quarterback or what teams are losing their quarterback in this upcoming season. And ironically enough, the one team that I thought was the team that Ohio State is facing off against on Monday. It's Notre Dame. Now, Notre Dame has a very young coach, 38 years old. He is a very good coach. And they have a lot of good young talent, including one of the best running backs in the league in Jeremiah Love, returning next year to the Fighting Irish. So you have young talent, you have a good young coach, and to top it all off, obviously Riley Leonard has to go. If you don't know, Riley Leonard has reached his eligibility limit, so he has to be going out. So there's a spot open for a quarterback at Notre Dame. But what puts a lot of interest into this Notre Dame selection for me, or this Notre Dame pick, this Notre Dame dark horse, is the fact that they're going to be making $20 million off of their run to the playoffs this season. Right now, because they made it to the national championship game, they're going to be making $20 million. How, you might ask? So when the committee, the college football committee, made this playoff arrangement for the bracket, they put in a stipulation that for every round, the conferences that put in teams will get a certain amount of money based on how many teams they put in. So, for example, if the SEC put in 3 teams, they would get, let's just say, $4 million to the conference. That money would then be split among all 18 schools in the SEC. And for that reason, each team, you have an incentive to get to the playoffs, they get money, and then each team is kind of compensated. And then each round, you get more money, and the money will increase depending on the round. So all you have to do is make it. So you have to make the first round, then you have to make the second round, then the third round, then the final. And Notre Dame has made all 4. The caveat in this whole thing, the trick, is that Notre Dame does not belong to a conference. They're independent, which means that all $20 million will be given directly to Notre Dame, which means they are free to use that money any which way they please, whether it's improving the campus, whether it's improving the football facilities, or adding that money to NIL deals to attract more transfers and more recruits, which is where this Quinn Ewers take comes into play. With the young talent, or the promising young talent, and a pretty good recruiting class coming in, you could also throw on another $4 million, $6 million to Quinn Ewers to say, hey, why don't you come over here? Why don't you come back over up north, come to Notre Dame, and you can play a nice schedule, get to the college football playoffs, and then rebuild your stock and possibly even win a national championship. So I think that one's a very interesting take. I think it is a dark horse. Now, if I had to give my opinion, I don't see Quinn Ewers coming back out and transferring. As much of a good idea as it is, just because his stock did drop, I can see a team taking a first or second round pick on him just for the pure talent and his pure raw ability, because he was a very good, talented quarterback, and he was very good last year before he got injured this year. So I don't see him moving off. But if he would, those would be the three teams I would look at as the top dogs, or at least as some dark horse candidates. So moving on from college football playoffs and college football to the NFL playoffs, we have the divisional round this week. It's going to be a fun matchup. We have 4 games. Every single one to me is going to be a good game. I know my favorite, obviously you can tell by me, I'm a Ravens fan. This is the jersey that I have on. So I do think that game will be the best, and I'll get to that in a second. But let me start off now just with the Saturday slate. So starting Saturday at 4:30, the Houston Texans will be taking on the Kansas City Chiefs in Arrowhead in cold weather. Every 3 of these 4 stadiums are outside, so it's going to be weather. The weather is going to be affecting the game for 3 of these games. The only other one is Detroit, which is going to be in Detroit, and it's a closed stadium, so it's not going to be really that much of an effect. But the other 3 will be fun. It's going to be playoff football in January. It's going to be cold, and some may even experience snow. For this Kansas City game, I haven't heard of any snow yet, but I did hear that it was going to be in the 20s to teens, so it's going to be cold, and it will be in Arrowhead, which is one of the loudest stadiums in all of college football. So 4:30 Saturday, and honestly, as much as I hate to say it, just because I don't want to see a three-peat personally, I'm going to have to go with Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. They're going to be able to pull out this win. By how much? Probably about a score or 2, just like they've been doing all season. But they will pull out a win and go to their, I guess it's like 4th consecutive AFC Championship game, at least it's the last 2 years. It's at least their 3rd consecutive AFC Championship game. They will make it there. Houston is great. Houston's a nice story. They beat the Chargers 32-12 in the wild card. They had a great game, but I just don't know if their offense has the firepower to stick with the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, the Kansas City Chiefs don't have the firepower they used to in previous years, but they still have a very good roster, and obviously one of the best playoff quarterbacks, if not the best playoff quarterback right now in the league, in Patrick Mahomes. Houston is also right now, the reason why I say they don't have their firepower is because they're out 2 of their top 3 receivers in Tank Dell and Stephon Diggs. And having 2 of your receivers out against a very good top 10 defense, top 15 defense at the worst, it's tough to ask a second-year quarterback to try and get over that hump. You have one receiver that can easily be doubled if you plan correctly, and Steve Spagnuolo always finds a way to plan incredibly for each game. If you find a way to plan correctly, you can definitely limit a receiver's impact on the game, and not having that second or third option that's consistent, it's going to be tough on the Texans. I do think they'll be able to put up some points. I don't think they're going to go shutout. I think it'll be about a 10-point game, probably like 24-14, 24-17 type of game, but I don't see them advancing onto the AFC wild card or AFC championship game. Now, as far as defense for the Texans, they're going to be a problem. I like the defense they have, but I think they're going to be affected by the cold, and I think they're going to be affected by the noise. Again, like I said, Kansas City is an incredible home field advantage. The noise, the stadium is built for the noise. The stadium is built to get the noise to the center of the field to disrupt and shake up the opposing team. And on top of that, you're in cold weather. It's going to be 20s. It's going to be below freezing. It's going to be tough to play. But I do have to shout out that the Texans do have a good defense. Derek Stingley, last game, had 2 interceptions. So he's coming off a very good game, probably one of his best in his career, especially in the playoffs. And on top of that, they have 2 edge rushers, Will Anderson Jr., the second year out of Alabama, and Daniil Hunter, the newly acquired trade asset from the Vikings, both of which had at least 10 sacks this season. So between those 2, they're going to get pressure. I think they will get pressure to Mahomes, but Mahomes always finds a way to make magic, and they always find a way to win, and you have Andy Reid at the helm. I don't see a way where the Texans upset. I mean, I can see a way, but not clearly enough to be like, I have the Texans winning. So for that reason, I have the Kansas City Chiefs moving on to the AFC Championship game to face off the winner of the Buffalo Ravens matchup, which I'll get to again in a second. I'm going on to the second Saturday game slate. So the second Saturday game will be the Washington Commanders versus Detroit Lions. It is in Detroit, so Detroit does have a big home field advantage as far as noise, but won't have the weather because it is inside, like I said earlier. Now, this game is 8 p.m. Saturday, so it's going to be the late night primetime game, It's going to be a very fun game. I think it's going to be a high-scoring game. But I did hear recently, actually it was earlier today, that David Montgomery is going to be returning to the field this Saturday night, which is a huge problem if you're a Commanders fan, because him and Jahmyr Gibbs in the backfield is absolutely dangerous. They have a nickname called Sonic and Knuckles after the characters, and it accurately represents who they are. Sonic, the speed; Knuckles, the power. David Montgomery is the power back that you use to get those extra yards, those grunt yards, and he can still break a 20-yard run, but he's used in the ISO formation, in the power formation, where you're just running up the gut, running straight forward, not worrying about going side to side. Jahmyr Gibbs, on the other hand, is the fast, Sonic-like player. He has the speed. He has the dual ability of catching and running. He opens and spreads out the field. He's more of the east-west back, while David Montgomery is more north-south back. So it's very interesting. It's kind of sad for a Commanders fan just because you've had a very good year, and I don't think this year should be taken as a failure if you lose this game. I mean, you were the second worst team last year. You get your rookie QB, new head coach, and you make it to the divisional round. I don't think it's a failure by far, but it is going to be just a little bit disappointing because you have so much high hope for a season. With that being said, I don't think Washington is going to be as low. I don't think they're going to be blown out in this game. I think it's going to be about a 6-point game. 34-28 is my prediction. 36-30. That's going to be about the score that it's going to be. They're going to be able to hang in. They're going to be able to score points, but I don't think they'll be able to get over the hump to win the game. And just one more thing to add to this, to just kind of prove the point of the rushing attack. While the Commanders are third in the NFL in passing defense, they are 29th out of 32 in run defense. So they do not do well against the run, and having a defense that can't defend the run as well, or be like they're a bottom 3 team that can defend the run, having that defense go up against the best running back room in the league, it just doesn't really make success. It's not really a recipe to success or to a win. So unless a really good game is played out of that defensive front and that Commanders run defense, I just see the Lions being able to get away with whatever they want, but still keeping it close because Jaden Daniels is going to be able to lead the Commanders down the field and score points. So it's going to be a good game. It's going to be close, like I said, but I do not see the Commanders moving on to the championship game for the NFC. I have the Lions. Now, moving on to the Sunday slate, we have 2 more games, one NFC, one AFC. Starting at 3 p.m. Sunday, we have the Rams versus Eagles. The Rams had a really good showing in their wild card, even though it was in Arizona due to the unfortunate wildfires in LA. With that being said, they went to Arizona, to their home field, or to Arizona's home field, to play the game. Ended up winning 27-9, beat the brakes off of the Minnesota Vikings, almost like the Minnesota Vikings should have been in the playoffs in the first place, and now move on to face Philly in Philadelphia. They face the Eagles in Philadelphia. It's going to be a tough game. I think it will be about a 10-point game. It's going to be like probably 34-24 type of game, but I don't know. I just don't see the Rams continuing their Cinderella story past this daunting Eagles team. Yes, Jalen Hurts threw for 34 yards and a half, and yes, he threw for 131 yards in a game. That's all great. The thing with me is that the Eagles are such a complete team that you don't have to have your quarterback throw for 150 yards to comfortably win a playoff game. They have Saquon Barkley in the back, a 2,000-plus yard rusher. They have one of the best offensive lines. They have one of the best defenses, probably the best cornerback trio in the league. They have arguably the best defensive lineman in the league in Jalen Carter. And on top of that, you have a dual threat QB that can run and can at least get the job done in the passing game to get it to your arguably best trio, wide receiver trio in the league. So they're such a complete team, and they're so dominant. And then have that and add the home field advantage of Philadelphia fans. It just doesn't seem like a recipe for success for the Rams. I don't see the Rams winning it. I think they'll compete. It'll probably be a 2-score game, 10-14 points, but I don't see the Rams escaping and walking out of that city of brotherly love with a win. So my NFC Championship game will be Philadelphia versus Detroit in Detroit. come next weekend. Now, for the final game of this weekend, for the one that is the most anticipated game, the one I'm looking forward to, the one I urge that if you can't watch any other game, watch this game. It is the Buffalo Bills taking on the Baltimore Ravens in Buffalo. MVP candidate versus MVP candidate. A really good defense versus a defense that has gotten a lot better since they last saw each other, the Ravens and the Bills, in week 4. You have a really good running back in Derrick Henry, a really good running back in James Cook. It's going to be interesting to watch. And what makes it even more interesting is the fact that the weather will be a huge factor. They're saying that the weather is going to be in the mid-teens, but it's going to feel like 8 degrees, and there is a good chance of snow. So Buffalo fans, Bills, Ravens, MVP candidate versus MVP candidate, and then you add a snow game onto that, it's must-see TV. For me, it's must-see TV. For any NFL fan, it's must-see TV. And I urge you that it is must-see TV for any regular, non-heavy fan. Maybe you just like watching football. You don't like watching a team. I would highly, highly urge to watch that game. It's going to be a fun one. It's going to be entertaining to watch. I have it being a close game, about a 3 to 6 point game, maybe 34-31, 34-28 type of game. Maybe it's a 35-29, one of those type of games. But I'm not going to flip-flop. I've said this in September. Originally, my Super Bowl pick was Packers from the NFC, which obviously failed last week when the Eagles beat them 22-10. And then it was Packers versus Ravens with the Ravens winning. And that was my pick back in September. I'm not going to flip off of that. I have the Ravens winning this game. Derrick Henry, Lamar Jackson, arguably the best running back duo in the league. Yes, I said running back room for Detroit, but this is a running duo. This is one of the most lethal, dangerous duos because you have the power of Derrick Henry and the finesse and elusiveness of Lamar. It's going to be tough. Snow does make it a little bit more challenging to have traction, to slip, and so forth, to make cuts. But when you have a guy like Derrick Henry that just runs north-south and runs 21 miles an hour and is built like a truck, you definitely don't want to try and tackle that guy in 8-degree weather. So I think it is built to benefit the Ravens a little bit more because you do have Josh Allen. Josh Allen is a tough runner. James Cook is the fast runner. It's kind of the opposite of the Lamar, Derrick Henry combination. But with that being said, I think it just benefits the Ravens a little bit more. Plus, the Ravens have a very good run defense. The Bills' defense for the run, at least statistically, hasn't been that good, but they are getting back a lot of players that were injured throughout the season. So for me, I do have the Ravens winning about 3 to 6 points. They're going to take it. They're going to move on to face the Kansas City Chiefs in the AFC Championship game. So next weekend, I have the Kansas City Chiefs facing off against the Baltimore Ravens, and then I have the Philadelphia Eagles facing off against the Detroit Lions. And those two matchups are my prediction for the championship games. One last thing I will say about this Baltimore-Buffalo game is that I believe if the Ravens win or if the Bills win, if either team wins, they will be the team that will not only win the AFC Championship, but will also win the Super Bowl. I think the impact this game has on a team morality, or like a team's morale, is so high that I believe it will carry them into the Super Bowl, into the AFC Championship game, into the Super Bowl, and then help them win the Super Bowl. It sounds kind of crazy, but morale is a lot bigger of a factor, and kind of big wins are a lot bigger of a factor. It's a big impact factor for a team. And when you have two MVP candidates that fans obviously on Twitter have been going back and forth, and it kind of has gotten into the locker room, and then it's gotten into a debate, saying that you've beat the MVP candidate that was supposed to be, beat you in the MVP race, or whatever the case may be, a team that was supposed to beat you or a team that had beat you that you just beat, no matter what you say, it boosts that morale so much and gives so much confidence to a team that I believe no matter who wins this game, they will end up going on to win the Super Bowl. So with that being said, moving on from NFL playoffs, we're going to teams, or I'm going to go start talking about teams that aren't in the playoffs. And right now, instead of looking for a ring, they're looking for a new head coach. And one of the teams that did this was the New England Patriots. They hired Gerard Mayo, a former Patriots player, about a year ago now, a little bit over, or actually a little bit under a year ago, to serve as their head coach, signed him to a deal, and after he won the last game of the season, which ended up knocking them down from the number 1 overall pick, he ended up getting fired. Now, is that the true reason? It's not quite confirmed, but that's the heavy speculation and the heavy rumors. So, with that being said, they ended up looking for a head coach, and the head coach they ended up hiring, which was earlier this week, was former Titans head coach Mike Vrabel. Now, Mike Vrabel, this head coaching hire is by far one of my favorites that I've seen so far. There haven't been a lot, but I do think that by the end of the season, this will be the best coaching hire of the season. And this is talking about from a year from now. This will be one of the best coaching hires of the season. I don't believe the Patriots will have a Texans or Commanders type jump where you're second worst, all of a sudden you jump up and make it to the playoffs. I don't see that happening. But I do see them going from a 4-win team to maybe a 6 or 7-win team, or maybe a 7 or 8-win team. So I think it's a great for that long term. He's been there before. He's knows where he's supposed to be. He's coached a team that hasn't been great, that has not had the star power of, let's say, a Ravens team or a Chiefs team at times or a Lions team, and he's still gotten them to the playoffs. So he knows how to coach, he knows how to lead men, and he knows how to play the game. The other benefit to me, which I think is a very big factor and a very big reason why I love this hire, is the fact that he used to play football, and he used to play for the New England Patriots specifically as a linebacker under Bill Belichick. So he knows the culture, he knows the team, he knows the town, and he knows the expectations. And all of that is key for a coach to be able to succeed as a head coach, or succeed with a team in the NFL. You see it a lot now that a lot of former players are being hired as coordinators or as coaches. And I think this trend has really increased a lot, or has improved a lot, because they're realizing that in order to connect to a locker room, in order to connect to this new wave of players, you have to be able to have someone that can connect on a personal level. And it ends up being a better leading tactic because they can sit there and go, I understand what you've been through. Like, I understand where you are, that you've been through a workout, that you have to do this through the locker room. I understand that. And I'm here to tell you that I can give you this advice and I can lead you guys in a certain way. Look at Dan Campbell. Dan Campbell used to play for the Lions. He's now coached them. They are now the number 1 seed. DeMeco Ryans played for the Texans, led them to the playoffs last year, led them to playoffs this year. You see this constantly with coaches, with former players becoming coaches, both with head coaching and offensive coordinators. And I think it is a very big trend that is increasing, and I don't think it will stop anytime soon. With all that being said, I do think that is one of the main reasons, that is one of the main reasons why I love this coaching hire so much. Now, moving on from coaching hires to coaching fires, it came out earlier this week. A lot of this news came out earlier about the Monday, Tuesday range. Mike McCarthy, the Dallas Cowboys head coach for about 3 years, just got fired earlier this week. So a lot of rumors have been swirling about who's going to take over the position, because they have yet to mention who they're hiring. So first off, I do believe this is a good move. Mike McCarthy really hasn't done much with the Cowboys, and it's not quite a knack on Mike McCarthy, which I do think it is a knack on Mike McCarthy. I'm not going to say he's completely not at fault, but I also think it's just the victim of the position. And by that, I just mean, think about it like kind of the Los Angeles Lakers, the basketball team. You have very good coaches that will go into a Lakers organization or even a Dallas Cowboys organization, for example. And when they get there, they can't quite live up to the hype because of all the media attention. And on top of that, the owners ahead of them. For example, the Dallas Cowboys, Jerry Jones is very polarizing, very media heavy. And with that, there comes a lot of weight and a lot of eyeballs watching your every move. So one wrong move you make, one decision that you make that's not agreed upon, blows up, goes viral across the internet. And not a lot of coaches can handle that pressure. So I do think this is a good move for Mike McCarthy. I think it's a good move for the Cowboys. And I think that finding another coach that will be just as good, Jerry Jones finally made the right call. He finally made the right call and finally put his foot down and said, all right, we're moving on. With that being said, there have been rumors of many possible coaches to be flying around. One of them was Steve Sarkisian. Steve Sarkisian is the head coach for Texas. Now, He is 50 years old. He is an offensive mind, used to be an offensive coordinator for Alabama. To my knowledge, he has not yet coached at the NFL level. However, I don't see him moving up to become a head coach of the Dallas Cowboys, mainly for the reason of he's already building a program and getting paid a ton of money to be a head coach for the Texas Longhorns. Now, some people are like, oh, but you could always get more money. That's great. But what he said, he was interviewed in one of the college football playoff documentaries, and he said himself that he came to Texas with a long-term goal of creating a SEC-like team that would compete yearly in and out for a championship in the college level. So with that being said, building a program from the ground up or rebuilding a program from the ground up, you have a special connection to that program, and I don't see a way that he would just up and leave it to someone else to do it for him. It's kind of almost like you having a kid to an extent. You can look at like Dabo and Clemson. Dabo built up a Clemson program, and he's not going to leave it because he built it up. It's almost like it's part of your life now. It's something you created, so you have a different affinity to it than if you just waltzed into, let's say, the Alabama job where Nick Saban built it, and you're just trying to grab the steering wheel and continue to drive. So I don't think Steve Sarkisian will be on there, but it was a head coach that was rumored to be there. Another one, which is heavily rumored, and right now probably the favorite for the job, is Deion Sanders. Now, both of Deion's kids are entering the draft. They are eligible. His two sons are Shiloh Sanders, at least the two sons playing are Shiloh Sanders and Shedeur Sanders. Shiloh is a defensive back, specifically a safety. Shedeur is a quarterback. Shedeur is projected to be a number one pick, arguably the top QB in the draft class. And so there is a opening that Deion Sanders might move on from Colorado because his sons aren't there. So the trick, though, is that Deion talked about if he were to move up to the head NFL level, he would want to coach his sons. So is Dallas willing to make the trade assets available or make the trades needed to suffice that want, to suffice that need that Deion wants, that desire that Deion wants? And if they are, great. If they aren't, okay, that's what it is. But nonetheless, to get into the actual Deion Sanders hire as a coach himself, he played for Dallas. If you don't know, he did play for Dallas during their peak in the 1990s. He played when they were America's team. They were truly America's team. They were winning in and out. They were winning everything. They were winning Super Bowls. They were on top of the world. That's when he played for Dallas. And again, like the Mike Vrabel signing, because he's played there before, he knows the culture, he knows the expectations, he knows the city, he knows the team, and he knows what he needs to do to bring this team back to the way it was in the 1990s, to bring them back to being America's team. So that is a very good expertise, and I think it's very good for him. Now, on a whole other side, which I believe is a very good reason to hire him and why he should be a top candidate, and in all fairness, why if they do hire him, it would be probably one of the smarter moves, is the fact that he is just as, if not more polarizing than Jerry Jones. So the big issue recently with some of these recent head coaches for the Dallas Cowboys is the fact that they're not as polarizing or as media driven as Jerry Jones. Jerry Jones is the media is very attracted to Jerry Jones and everything he does. So when you look at the Cowboys, you see the owner a lot more than you see the head coach who's supposed to be the face of the team. He's supposed to be the head of the team. And you see the owner more. With Deion Sanders coming into Dallas, the ability that the impact that he brings is the fact that when there's a media press conference, it's not going to be Jerry Jones's face on TV, it's going to be Deion Sanders. And he's going to be able to bring that media back into the locker room aspect. Not quite locker room specifically, but back to the team rather than the front office. And I think that's going to be a very good benefit for the Dallas Cowboys. Now, another name to watch for. These were not rumored, but these are ones that I began thinking of. One of them is Pete Carroll. Pete Carroll was the Seahawks head coach in 2023. This was his first year not there. He was promoted. We say that with quotations. Basically, he was fired or stepped down as the head coach of the Seahawks to then join the front office as a personnel experience or some sort of executive part of the Seahawks offense. Then all of a sudden during this offseason, as soon as the games ended, rumors started swirling that he would be open to head coaching jobs. Two of the jobs that he has already looked at, one he's interviewed for, one he's about to interview for, is the Chicago Bears. That one he just interviewed for January 9th. And then the Raiders he has an interview for in a few days. So he is looking back out to be another head coach. He is 73 years old. He is still a very good head coach. It's not like he deteriorated at all. He is a very good head coach, and I think he'd be a good pickup. The reason I like him is because I believe he'll have a little bit of a backbone to counteract Jerry Jones. He also just brings a defensive mind to the Cowboys, which could help them bring back their really good, their stark defense that they had in previous years before the injuries hit this year. So I do think Pete Carroll is a good option. I don't think he will be hired. I think the Bears or Raiders will probably take a chance on him before then. But if the Cowboys are looking for one, definitely send out an interview request for Pete Carroll. He is still at the top of his game. Well, I wouldn't say the top of his game. He's still one of the better head coaches available and one of the better head coaches in the NFL. I think it'd be a great idea for the Cowboys to hire Pete Carroll. Now, this last person is my favorite, but he has not coached in the NFL since 2021. This is Jon Gruden. Jon Gruden last coached for the Las Vegas Raiders in 2021 before certain allegations and other methods ended up getting him released from the Raiders. But nonetheless, he is open to coaching again. I believe he's open. There's rumors that he's open. He's looking back at it, and there are a lot of teams that are rumored to be interested in him. The reason I like him the best for Dallas is very similar to why I like Deion Sanders. And it's the fact that he has a backbone and he will step up and stand up to Jerry Jones. He's not going to sit back, kind of like Mike McCarthy did, and just accept whatever Jerry Jones does. If Jerry Jones makes a poor point or makes I don't mean it as harsh, but if he makes a stupid decision like, oh, do this or do this, I don't see Jon Gruden sitting there and be like, okay, Jerry, we'll do that and we'll just move on. I see Jon sitting there going, no, we're going to do it my way. I'm the head coach. You're the owner. You make the decisions of the money. I'll make the decisions of the players. And I think that would be a great part to have. On top of that, Jon Gruden will attract media, not quite to the level of Deion, maybe not even quite to the level of Jerry, but he'll attract it more than the level of a Pete Carroll or of a Steve Sarkisian or of a Mike McCarthy. And one bonus even to the media side of it, a bonus to the actual mind of Jon Gruden is the fact that he's an offensive-minded coach. And ever since Kellen Moore left, the offense really hasn't done well, whether it's injuries. This year specifically, it just really did not look good. And so having Jon Gruden there who is offensive-minded, maybe he can unlock a piece of Dak that we saw last year when he was an MVP candidate. Maybe he can re-find it, re-unlock it after Dak recovers from his injury and really set that up and bring this Cowboys whole team, bring this Cowboys culture back to where it was when it was America's team in the 90s in its prime, or even just last year when it was competing in the playoffs. So those are my 4 names to watch. 2 of them were rumors, that's Steve Sarkisian and Deion Sanders. The other 2 are names that I threw in that I think you should just keep an eye out for in Pete Carroll and Jon Gruden. But that there was the big breaking news, is that Mike McCarthy firing, and now they're looking for that next head coach. The best thing to do is to try and get it before the draft so you can kind of get situated, because the worst thing you have to do is draft your players and then get a coach, and it's just going to throw everything out of whack. The best thing they can do is in the next week or 2, maybe at worst the week after the Super Bowl, try and find that coach. And there are a lot of good coaches on the market. Like I said, these are 4 of them, and there are a lot better options. There are a lot more options out there. And I think it's one of the better coaching cycles as far as natural talent and natural ability of head coaches. So the last rumor I wanted to address was the Mike Tomlin Steelers rumor. And so earlier this week, or at the end of this weekend, about Monday, there was a rumor that started flying around that the Mike Tomlin, the head coach of the Steelers, possibly played his last game or coached his last game for Pittsburgh. And for me, it was kind of shocking to hear that because the backstory of Mike Tomlin is that he's coached the Steelers for 18 seasons, led them to one Super Bowl, and has never had a season where he's finished below 500 as his average. So in other words, he never finished with a worse record than 8-8 or 9-8. That is an impressive stat because no other coach that is in the history of the game has ever had that statistic. That many 500 seasons or minimum 500 seasons in a row as a coach. So when you looked at it, I'm sitting there, why would they want to get rid of him? Well, I looked a little bit into the playoff history, and let me just show you some of the facts that I found. So the first one that I found was that this playoff series, so since January of 2017, the last 8 years exactly, January 2025 to January 2017, the Steelers have not won a game in the playoffs. They have made it 6 times since then. Since that 2017 in January, they have made it 6 times, and they have not won a single playoff of those 6 trips to the playoffs. You look a little bit deeper. For a coach that is known to be at minimum 500 wins, so a minimum of 500 average in a season, so a minimum of 8 or 9 wins, his playoff record as a head coach is 8-11. So while he's reaching this 500 milestone or 500 mark every season in the regular season, he's not even close to it in playoffs. And then you dig a little bit deeper and you realize that in the last 10 years, so from January 2015 to January 2025, the Steelers have a total of 3 wins, all of which came before 2017 of January. Now, they have been to the playoffs 8 times in those 10 years. So 8 trips, and you only have 3 wins to show for it. And the last 6 times you've been, you have 0 wins. This is where the rumors started building. Then you add on the fact that Mike Tomlin used to be the defensive coordinator for the Minnesota Vikings. So he's a defensive-minded coach coming into the Steelers to coach a team and hopefully bring them to a Super Bowl, obviously fulfill every single player team's desire to get that hardware, to bring it back to the city. Well, a defensive coach, you would think, would have a very good defense in the playoffs. But in the last 6 games, that's actually been the opposite. In the last 6 games, and I'll write them up right here, these are their opponents' total points that they scored. 28, 31, 42, 48, 45, and 36. Those 6 numbers were the total points scored by the opponents of whoever the Steelers were playing. So whoever the Steelers were playing put up those amount of points on them in the last 6 playoff games that they've had. And the craziest part about this, it's not like they're playing the Ravens every year. It's not like they're playing the Bills every year. Some of these teams were the 2018 Jacksonville Jaguars, the 2021 Cleveland Browns that then went on to the Kansas City Chiefs the next round and lost. The Kansas City of 2022, that's a fair statement. Buffalo 2023, Baltimore 2024, Patriots 2017, those are fine. But when you're sitting here against a Jacksonville Jaguars team that's led by Blake Bortles and a Cleveland Browns team that's led by Baker Mayfield and hasn't been back to the playoffs since, you're really questioning, where does that defensive mind come from? Because it's not showing in the playoffs. And he obviously doesn't have the best track record of offensive coordinators. He hasn't hired the best, especially since 2018. He's had 3. It's Randy Fitchner, Matt Canada, Arthur Smith. Randy and Matt both have been fired or let go or parted ways. Arthur Smith didn't really do much better this year. And so it's really starting to question and bring up concern of Mike Tomlin's ability to actually compete when it's necessary, when the most pivotal time to compete is. So for that reason, I completely believe why this rumor really took ground, really took root, and all of a sudden grew like crazy. But with that being said, I completely disagree with it. I do not think Mike Tomlin should be fired or let go, and the Steelers would be absolutely wrong to let him go. There is no coach that I've ever seen, that I've ever read about, that has had the consistency that Mike Tomlin has in 18 years. And I don't know any coach that you can get to replicate that consistency and replicate what you can do with what he has. I mean, the Steelers don't have 10, 15 stars like the Ravens or the Bills or the Chiefs or any other team you want to name, the Lions. The Steelers have some decent stars on defense, and then their offense is just made of good players. Not great, not consistent, but good players that can play in the NFL. It's not ones that shine in the NFL. And for him to be able to hit that 500 mark every single season, I just don't know who else you're going to get. John Gruden, Pete Carroll, Steve Sarkisian, Deion Sanders, Robert Saleh, Gerard Mayo, any of those people you want to bring up, I don't see them replicating or even coming close to replicating what Mike Tomlin has done as a consistency standpoint with what he's had to work with. And for that reason, I do believe the Steelers should not be firing Mike Tomlin. I think they should stick with him and let it ride out. Because if you can get a good, young franchise QB, whether it's Justin Fields or from the draft, and you can build them up, you can have a very, very good franchise. It's just Mike Tomlin hasn't had the resources that he needs to be able to create that good of a franchise. And the last thing that it's just kind of sad as a Steelers fan, and this is me as a Ravens fan speaking, the sad thing for the Steelers is that they're stuck in this NFL mediocrity purgatory. In other words, they're good enough to get to the playoffs with just a good record, which puts them in the 20 to 32 range of picks. So now you're picking anywhere between, I guess it's 18 all the way up to 32. So you're picking the back half of the draft in the first round. And then on top of that, even though you make it to the playoffs, you really have no hope in actually making any damage or bringing home the hardware, the trophies, the accolades that everyone wants in that city. And it's just really kind of sad as a team, because I know if my team was stuck like that, that would just be awful. Like, you're sitting there and it's like, we're not good enough to get a trophy, but we're also not bad enough to get a good pick with a good player. And they're just stuck in this middle zone. But I think if they can find that future QB, whether it's maybe Russell Wilson turns a leaf, or if it is Justin Fields, who's 25, 26 years old, they got to find something to change it. But firing Mike Tomlin isn't the change you need. Getting a quarterback is, and getting a competent offensive coordinator is. And so that's my take on that rumor. But that is all for me today in this episode. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. This was a little bit of a longer episode, so thank you for hanging around if you have till now. I do want to just again thank you guys. It will be another episode up next week. It will be weekly now. So until then, enjoy, have fun, watch the game, enjoy it, stay warm. If you're in a cold place, if you're in a warm place, just relax, because it's going to be a fun weekend. It's going to be entertaining, and I can't wait. Thank you guys again, and you're watching Brian Sports Hub, your source for sports.